Hi, welcome to Room with a View by Make More Noise. And tonight we have some special guests. So you all know who I am and who Chinzia is. And tonight we have Jean, is half of the duo who run Actual Feminism and is best known for the podcast series Radfems in Genderland. As well as online activism, she is active in the radical feminist movement in Brisbane, Australia. So welcome, Jean.
I said to amend that to like a little bit active. Don't oversell it. Yeah.
It's all right. And we got Rebekah. I don't know how to say your last name. Is it Wershbale? Wershbale.
It's phonetic. Or you could just make it up. Call me Washable if you like. People do.
Rebekah Wershbale, a lesbian mother and feminist activist from Macclesfield, England. She shot to infamy after the Daily Mail covered a story in which she was kicked out and barred from her local pub for wearing the woman, adult, human, female T-shirt.
That was
me. One of these.
Yep. More recently, she's been trying to raise awareness about detransitioning and engaging with the broader LGBT community. And then finally, we have Elaine Hutton, is a lesbian feminist who became involved in feminism during the second wave in 1977. She has been working as part of a local group challenging schools about their emphasis on gender ideology, which is harming young women generally and young lesbians in particular. So tonight we're going to start with Chinzia, if you don't mind. What have you got for us?
Well, so it's the Labour Party and little green shoots. Her name is Tonya Antoniazzi, and she's a Labour MP for Gower in Wales. And she stood up in Parliament to ask, she's calling for biological sex of criminals to be recorded accurately. Obviously, we know that female crime is very low, and it's not. We're being misrepresented in criminal activity because men who say they're women are attacking us, and then it's being put down as female crime. So it's really brave of her to stand up. Obviously, we know what Rosie Duffield has gone through. She seems to trend every month, and it's lots of activists that don't like her. So far, Tonya, touchwood, has not faced any, rush. She's not being piled on her Twitter feed. She's tweeting about rugby, having sex accurately recorded in rugby, how concussion, the risk of concussion on women, on females, is different to men, and she wants that recorded accurately as well. So she's just not just criminals; she's doing it in sport too. So I think she's really brave, and you feel really optimistic until you realise there are 198 Labour MPs, and only 2 of them have stood up for female rights or to talk about female sex. That's your optimism goes down a bit, doesn't it?
I'll say 2 is better than none, though, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, but it's going to be a long haul for the caucuses. You've got the lesbian Labour women's movement. You've got the Labour Declaration, the Women's Rights Declaration in Labour. These caucuses do exist, but they've got a long haul to get MPs to actually come out and say what like Tonya is saying and Rosie Duffield. I wish them luck, because I want to vote Labour. I'm a socialist at heart, but I'm not going to vote for them because they know what a woman is, but they refuse to say it. Our MPs refuse to say what we are, and until they all come out and say it, or most of them, I'm not voting for them. I don't know how you feel about the vote.
I think that's fair enough. I think as well, like I didn't vote Labour this year, and that's the first time in my life because I feel well let down. But I can't vote for anybody who won't say what a woman is.
They know what a woman is.
Does anybody else?
Go on, Rebekah.
I think a lot of us left Labour in a huff, didn't we? In like that big May Day resignation ages ago, thinking that might start getting some attention. And all it did was just like push our concerns further into the sidelines, which was extraordinarily frustrating. And I think probably most of us have tried to go interactive with our local like MPs and councillors and stuff, and just no avail at all. I've even gone as far as like cornering the councillors in a pub and just like making them speak about all of these issues with me, and they somehow kind of bring it back down to potholes Although my
What
local
about-
Labour councillors did peak trans and gave me a bollock and started talking to me about it.
It's what about
that was
isn't
good.
it? I've already
Yeah, can I?
there's going to be COVID. COVID's more important, and we are just as important. COVID has hit women hard at home. Abused women, refuges are closing down. It's whataboutery that's not good enough. And 2 MPs out of 198, just I'm not optimistic. I think it's
Can I tell you
No, I
what
know
we
how you
did?
feel.
Elaine, what was you going to say?
Yeah, well, I was going to say quite a lot about this because in Bristol, all the MPs are Labour, and I tried to engage with my MP, Kerry McCarthy, about 4 years ago, and I'm part of, you didn't say or I didn't say, but I'm one of the founders of the Lesbian Rights Alliance.
brilliant.
And we actually met, we were consulted for the changes in the Gender Recognition Act, and they sort of ignored us. And a couple of us would regularly write to Tory, the Minister for Women, etc. And Kerry, at one point, I used to try to engage with her, and she'd write me long emails back saying, not only was I transphobic, I was homophobic. I couldn't believe it. Like, I've been a lesbian for about 40 plus years. She dared to tell me I was homophobic. So I actually, in the last election, I mean, the MP election, I spoiled my vote for the first time ever and got one of the, but I voted for Women Don't Have Penises. I put the big sticker across. And what I did for these local elections, because I wanted to vote, so with the police, I think the police are really important at the moment because of all the hate stuff against lesbians and against women. So I wrote to all the candidates, there were 5 of them for the police, PCC, Police Commissioner job, and 3 of them answered. And I wrote sort of extensively about lesbian hate crimes, sexual abuse in schools. There've been a lot of stuff that we've put on Facebook about what to do. And 3 of the police commissioner candidates answered, and one of them said, give me evidence of hate crime against lesbians. So I did. And he said, I'd like to work with you. The other 2, one of whom was Labour, just sent back all this rubbish about a statement about transphobia, how you've got to be sensitive to both sides. So I thought, well, he's gone. And with the councillors, we had 2 Lib Dems and 2 Labour in my area. And I sent them a lot of questions based on stuff we got from the Safe Schools Alliance, who we work with. We work in Bristol trying to do stuff around schools and stop all this rubbish going on. And what actually happened, the 2 Lib Dems answered in detail, and one of them said, I'm getting other letters from parents, from concerned parents, so can I come and see you if I win? And the 2 Labour ones didn't bother to answer. So I actually have now followed it up with the Lib Dem. They won. And the new head of the what's it called? The
Equality Human Rights.
Equality and EHRC is a Lib Dem baroness. So I sent her statement that's been circulating around to the Lib Dems and pointed that out and said, so I'm just kind of, I've given up hope on Labour, and I feel really sad about it. But I do think, because I've been around for a long time, as you can see by looking at me, when we were in work for the Inner London Education Authority, this is back in the 70s, and then Ken Livingstone was the head of the GLC. Have you heard of the Greater London Council? It was very radical, and Thatcher abolished it and abolished the Inner London Education Authority. But a huge number of lesbians, we had a group called Lesbians in Education. I worked in a girls' project. I had young lesbian groups, anyway, we were sort of used to engaging with policy. So I sort of haven't given up. I mean, I just sort of think you have to take those in power where they are and try to change their minds. Anyway, I've said too much at the moment, but that's kind of what we've been doing. But the real problem is, like, all the schools are captured, as we know, policy captured, and all these young women are just mouthing this stuff that they've heard. And of course, we're through the Lesbian Rights Alliance, we've met a lot of young lesbians. I mean, we're not just old. We've got I know a lot of women, well, as you know, Rebekah, you know, who are young, and it's the real problem is how to get to all the girls in schools. Because anyway, I've said enough.
It's really tough at the moment.
Yeah, no, it is. And also,
like, that's all really interesting. It's sorry, can I just wanted to make a point about the Lib Dem candidate, because I also wrote to all the PCC candidates, but absolute radio silence from all of them, apart from the Reform guy, the Brexit Party, who has obviously been called like homophobic and racist because he's not about like the rainbow lanyards and stuff, but he's the fresh air guy. But speaking to, you know, other like women around here, like the Lib Dems had like a total sort of like a gag order essentially, preventing them from talking about it. So it's really heartening to hear that like we've got a Baroness Faulkner on board with it. My God, maybe the Lib Dems will rise from the ashes. Maybe they actually learned from the Challoner thing. That would be a turn up for the books, wouldn't it?
We don't want the Conservatives having a grip on reality, do we? It's not healthy for democracy at all.
Of course we don't.
No,
we don't.
No.
Well, the problem with Conservatives is they're in the power and they're not doing anything to stop it either. So
not much. Little.
They started
it.
Bare minimum.
Self-ID. They stopped self-ID going through. That's pretty important.
After a lot of pushing from women, though. A lot of pushing.
Yeah.
They do seem to be more willing.
There was a talk to begin with, though, just like this incredibly poorly thought out thing.
And the only people in Australia, Jean, who are doing anything Tories, or I'm from Melbourne, by the way.
Like, I was sitting here. I'm the only foreigner, and look, I'm not. Maybe I'm
from
just
Essex.
I'm just not overly invested in the minutiae of UK politics beyond.
Yeah,
but
you're doing really good stuff in Brisbane, aren't you?
Me,
I'm from Australia.
I host a games night, but I was thinking about the crime thing, and I do wonder about that. I think about it a lot because so I work in the criminal justice system, and I have I've encountered a lot of very dangerous and violent women in my role, and you know, particularly a lot of really sinister things that tend to just sort of fly under the radar. Like, broader society is not aware of it, but there's really strong patterns of offending that women engage in, and I do think about how much the trans thing and self-ID would impact on it. And to be honest, I'm not entirely convinced it would be a staggering amount until you start getting down to things like child porn offences, and like, that's just not something women do. Like, if a woman has child porn offences, it's in the company of a man. And the woman has an intellectual disability or a severe personality disorder. That's always what it looks like. Women don't hoard terabytes of porn. And the other ones
they don't expose themselves in our city. We have no.
Well, I mean, the mentally ill ones can, but not. You know, they don't masturbate on trains like men do. Yeah.
In the I come from, there's never been a
whereas men masturbating in public is like, they love it.
It's endemic.
So that clearly is a sexed crime.
Look, and it's a bit tough because quite often the charge that's before a court doesn't tell you the pattern of behaviour that led up to that charge. You know, like a willful damage charge can be, it can be kicking a hole in a wall, or it can be smearing feces on a wall. Like, they're very different intentions behind the same charge. And so I do wonder how much it would impact on stats, but I really think when you get down to sex offending, that's where it makes, it would make a real difference.
Absolutely.
Actually,
well, it is
And
making
also,
a
like,
difference.
nullify the stats that we do need about women. Yeah, sorry, go on, everybody. I'm just thinking over here.
no, I think that's a good discussion, and I was going to ask Cinzia if you have anything to add, and if not, I'll move on to Jean and ask Jean what she's up to.
No, I don't think I have anything. So go ahead, Jean. Tell us what you do.
I'm going to discuss my local politics, and then
Okay.
you guys
Yeah.
listen. No, I wrote I have watched this show, and I've been quite impressed by people just seem to throw out this topic and everybody else gets involved. And I have agonized for days about what I'm going to bring up, because I think everything that I'm interested in is controversial, almost all of it.
Try
and-
it.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I wrote the allegory in the chat, but I'm not actually going to do that. There's one that I've wanted to raise for a while, which I think about a fair bit. So I interact in a lot of. I don't tend to hang out in mostly Radfem groups online. I tend to interact in mixed spaces where people are free to argue and generally be dickheads. I spend all day arguing professionally, and when I get online, I just want to be offensive or like inappropriate or not really have to think about it. But one thing that has come up, so I interact with a lot of trans men and detransitioners, and something that has come up that I really agree with and I've thought about a lot is like Radfem analysis about transitioning women, and I quote, being sad about the loss of like quote unquote like healthy breasts and so on. I think that if I woke up tomorrow and I had a hairy body and no breasts and effects of testosterone, it wouldn't bother me. I kind of like the idea of having a stronger jaw. I don't love the idea of having facial hair, but I don't mind. It wouldn't bother me that much. And I think that that's something that is potentially a bit alienating about this narrative to younger women, is the idea that having those traits is automatically going to be a bad thing. And when I talk to detransitioners and you know, female identified women who you know present as men in public, they agree, like they find that side of it quite alienating. Like, does anybody else ever think about it? It's not like I'm motivated. I'm not motivated to transition. That actually sounds like a major hassle, and there's so many things I'd rather blow my money on than having my breasts removed. But it wouldn't bother me if I didn't have them.
I think you're right. It is quite a controversial topic because it borders on there's two things I think about straight away, and one is the pressures that women have about their bodies to conform to femininity, and then the other side of it is if you're not naturally feminine, nowadays you have a pressure to transition and be a man because you've got those traits. Like I've got PCOS.
There's no doubt that in many cases the double, you know, having the top surgery, it's just the flip side of the exact same coin as breast you know, silicone implants.
Well, I think it could be taken that way, yeah, because I come from a place where everybody has a boob job and lip fillers and Botox and all sorts of stuff done to them, and they see it as no different. And whereas I'm sort of in the camp of, I don't really agree with altering your body for any reason other than needing to, medically needing to.
I'm with you, Birdie. And also, after reading Abigail Schreier's book, the consequences that it's, once you're on the testosterone and you have the mastectomy, there's a medical condition where their pockets fill up with fluid before their period, and it's incredibly painful. It's things like that I'm not
sure, but it's like 5 a.m. and I'm drinking gin, so there's lots of choices that I make in my life that are not particularly good or natural for me. And I'm not saying that I want to take testosterone, or, you know, my example there was that if I woke up tomorrow and that was just what I had, it would be like, okay, I mean, that's fine. I don't really care.
I think that's
come off the testosterone. Once you come off the testosterone, then your pockets fill up, and it's incredibly painful. So for those girls that have come off the testosterone and have had a chest surgery, it doesn't end. Before each period, those pockets fill up with fluid. It is incredibly painful. I couldn't condone that. I couldn't be like, yeah, go for it, because it sounds horrific.
Sure, I'm not condoning it though. Yeah.
I think as a thought exercise, there is a difference between what you're saying, Shinzi, and what we're talking about, and what Jean's saying. So I think what Jean, you're saying, if you woke up and this was just how you were, then it wouldn't bother you. I think that's different. I think we have ways of dealing with what we are, and I don't think that's something we're talking a lot about, is dealing with ourselves as we are.
I just think, there's a bit of theory of mind there, that it is, there are women out there who have done these things, and even if they detransition, maybe they don't particularly regret the physical changes. I've certainly spoken to detranses that do.
You are right. And I am going to like fully back you up here on all of the interactions I've had with detransitioners. Obviously, care is a really big part of my life as well. It's a thing that I'm thinking about all the time. And I naively thought at the beginning of, all these lasses getting in touch with us and kind of finding a safe port in radical feminism, brilliant, this is going to be absolutely fantastic. But what we kind of forget, what we kind of take for granted, is that we understand radical feminist theory. We've been couched in it. We've been living it like it's our thing. These lasses are coming to it because, they're ostracized from, the trans community that they've been in. And for them, I think a lot of it feels like going from one cult into another, because there is this like kind of big monolithic instance on, the female body's like the goddess form and like everything about it's perfect. And of course that's alienating. Like most people feel a bit like funny about radical feminism when they come across it. And I think it is causing a schism, and it's something that I think we really need to pay attention to. And, there's been all of these discussions about like, should we use language like mutilations? How shall we be like, forthright about what it is? And it's just like
mutilation. I like it, but I get that. That's
like agreed. And like any unnecessary surgery, it is. Yeah. But yeah, the idea that like they're just going to spring fully formed into like perfect little Radfems, obviously that was not going to happen. These are still women who are like rejecting femininity, who don't quite understand the nuance of the way we reject femininity, for example. And it's going to take a lot more like understanding before we start doing everybody's head in, basically. And this is a really crucial point, because like we are the sort of like the first bastion for these lasses, but we don't want to be like really over the top, like just scum manifesto them away. So yeah, there's a lot of value in paying attention to what they're actually still saying, rather than just come on in, let's all get sad about all these surgeries. So just wanted to give you my backup on that one.
Ambivalent about having their breast removed, then okay, like
a lot of them do, and I still feel like it's still a trauma response in a lot of ways, because they haven't processed what's happened to them, because they've invariably been quite young when it's happened. But I don't think it's necessarily helpful to be going on about how sad they must feel about it, or like telling them how to feel, when all they've got to do is kind of, they've got years to tick it over. It's going to be there for the rest of their lives. We just need to be a lot more patient with it.
I think as well that we are seeing a lot of young women that are not even saying they're trans wanting to have their breasts removed because they're non-binary. And I actually think this is quite a lot more of a common thing to not like your breasts than what we say it is. Does that make sense? I think there's not a lot of talking about it, because
agnostic.
Can I say something about the word mutilation? Because I think it's really interesting what you said, and it's something I think about as well. But I think when older feminists are talking about mutilation, it's more about trying to impress the seriousness of what might happen on parents rather than young people themselves. But the other thing, the other thing I'd like to say, my mother died of breast cancer, and she first got it in Melbourne. She first got the first lump in her breast when I was about 9, and she was dying right through till I was 15. First one breast was removed, then the other. And of course, it was quite barbaric in those days, the sort of treatment, and it dragged on, and the cancer came back. And I just think what she went through, and I mean, I've sort of never forgotten it. And then, being a feminist, I'm speaking personally here, but not politically, as time went on, we started to have consciousness raising groups, because that was a big thing in second wave feminism, and everyone would be talking about their mothers. And I would sort of feel really deprived. I lived in Newcastle on Tyne at the time. That's in the north, Jean. And I was a teacher, and I remember everyone decided that one session we'd talk about our mothers. And I was sort of really upset because I sort of didn't have a mother to talk about. And I went and I was an English teacher, and I took a pile of books and I said, oh, I'm just going to listen and correct their writing. And they all said, oh, you're really arrogant, etc. And it was just more that I didn't really want to engage, because I didn't sort of know at that stage what to say. And I just think I can't bear the thought of young women being coerced into, one of you said earlier, removing parts of your body unnecessarily, when actual sort of the treatment for cancer, it's still quite barbaric in a way, I think, a lot of times. And the other thing, because we were all sort of second wave feminists, were influenced by people like Mary Daly, gynecology, and she, have any of you come across Mary Daly, that book? It's a Bible for us. And we and she just sort of talked about the medical profession, savaging women's bodies, and a lot of us second wave feminists had that kind of, wanting to sort of keep away from medicine. And the joke for me, I had a stroke when I was only 59, and I'm on all this, I keep healthy, and I've stopped going to the gym through COVID, but I'm going to take it up again. But we just had, as we're getting older, we sort of find we get things wrong with us. But I still have this real aversion to thinking, and of course, I don't know if you read Jennifer Billock, there's sort of a lot of stuff about transhumanism and what's the way bodies are being modified for big pharma, for drug purposes. So there's all that. But I do think, Jean, what you're saying, I still take that on, because I did think about that. In fact, that it's not good for young women who have transitioned. I'm sorry, I'm speaking as an old woman, though I don't feel old. And it probably, it can sound brutal, and I do take your point that it's not a good thing particularly to be doing.
I just think
sure, but I just want to say very quickly, just to relax you all, I did live in Manchester, so I understand geography and stereotypes. It's just the current affairs that I'm not down with. But I'm just mindful that breasts are there for the purpose of reproduction, essentially, and facilitating reproduction. And in the absence of doing that, they don't serve a lot of purpose. Having
I disagree. I think I disagree with that.
Yeah, I disagree profoundly.
Sexual, there's sexual pleasure that nipples, and I'm just going to say that if there were no young girls and young men on YouTube coming up every month describing how miserable they are because they've believed, gender ideology, then I'd be like you, absolutely fine. But
the videos of these girls screaming and shouting and being really happy because they've had their breast removed is so disturbing. Super disturbing.
Isn't it? If I see another unnecessary mastectomy, I think I might just scream and never stop.
About the regretters, the girls and the boys that are going on YouTube talking about the regret, and if they weren't there, then I'd be a lot more cooler about it. But I'm not. I think I'm fair enough. The language that we use, absolutely, but to say that just be a bit more laid back, I'm not, because of vaginal atrophy and because of these side effects of these surgeries. Not for everyone, but some of them, and they talk about it and how miserable it makes their lives. I'm not going to be so laid back about it. But I take your point about language, about mutilation. That's all.
I never said anything about language. I never said anything about that. I'm just mindful that.
That's just part of the wider discussion around how best to sensitively talk about it, but. There's no room left for sensitivity now. It's gone far too far. We need to be explicit about what is happening.
It's not even being explicit, it's about being direct and truthful.
Yeah, exactly.
Sexual pleasure.
Unfortunately, that means explicit in these terms because what's happening is so graphic.
Yeah, no,
That is true as well, yeah.
Removing them is some part of your sexual pleasure, and I don't know if I'm down. I'm not down with that. It's not. I don't know. I'm not. I don't think that's healthy. Actually,
There's something dark about removing a part of female sexual pleasure when for so long we've been told we're not essentially not really allowed to have it.
But I also understand.
And this is again being aimed at very, very, very young women. It's like taking their sexual choices away from them before they can even comprehend what they're losing.
Very young women.
Like it's being sold to young children.
What was that, Jean? Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Like young women who most of their sexual experiences have been, informed by, partners who are informed by pornography. They probably have never enjoyed sex in their life. The loss of it is not a thing to them, and it's devastating knowing. But yeah,
for a lot of them,
well, they kind of get they do become cognizant of it. How couldn't you? Because you grow up and that happens.
you do.
A lot of younger women, me included, not enjoy sex until later on in life. So that's they're not really thinking about their future either, that actually they may want that sexual pleasure in their 40s. So I'm just very, I'm not.
Also not the best way to approach discussing it. You guys are going to want sex pleasure in your 40s.
Oh, no, I'm rubbish. I'm not a therapist. I didn't train in therapy.
Well, this was something that came up when we were in court with Kira's case. Just like how do you have that conversation with kids? It's like you can't sit down with a 10-year-old and talk about orgasms. Like, at what point is that on an NHS remit? Why is that even happening? So yeah, that was a huge point that came up. It's just like, are we in good conscience okay with taking away this? Because it's just words to them. They don't understand it. Like
No
women
idea.
don't understand sex properly for a very long time. And this is just fucking pulling the sex rug out.
Oh, you're right.
So that was the least controversial thing I could think to talk about.
Well, I was going to say earlier,
It's not even that controversial. It's just
she
it's not
tweeted out
controversial.
in America. So in America, you can get gender nullification surgery, and they're now making you like a Ken doll, male and female, like a Ken or Barbie. No, you just got a tiny hole.
well, they say that, but it's just going to be like a massive tiny scar.
Yeah.
This is kids wanting to get away from sex before they've even had it.
Absolutely, it's for non-binary and gender non-conforming. And
I've seen posts of those people, and those people that are getting it are like severely mentally ill. Like, it's not selling it like the Nutra like surgery is not a mainstream thing. The people who are getting it done, there's probably 10, 20, and they post about it because they're narcissists and they they're clearly personality disordered and severely traumatized, and this is a point of whatever for them. Yes, but the fact that there is a surgeon out there that would do that to somebody for the right amount of cash is fucked. But it's also America. It's maybe not even the most fucked thing. Not in the top 20 most fucked things that are happening in America.
Well, it's happening in Australia, isn't it? I mean,
I'd have it banned. Ban it.
Sorry, Elaine, what was that?
Yeah, it's happening in Australia. I mean, there's sort of, and they're taking no notice of Kira's case, for instance. They're not seeing that as a precedent. I'm really shocked by what's going on in Australia, but it's state by state, isn't it? It's not.
Are you talking about like the wave of self-ID legislation?
Yeah.
That's happening around. Yeah, look, I've spoken to my MP about it, and he was pretty sympathetic, to be honest. And now it's coming out in my state as well. So we're going back to see him and be like, hey, we just spoke to you about this, and remember that you said it was dodgy? Oh, now it's happening. It is a little bit different depending on what state you live in. I'm fortunate enough to live in the state that had the most no votes against gay marriage. So the legislation ends up quite moderate by the time it gets through.
Yeah.
But,
well, I'm against gay marriage. I think it's I can't believe that lesbians wanted to get married.
Yeah. But
I think we just want the party.
Pardon?
What makes? Sorry, I was going to say, what makes you against gay marriage? I'm intrigued. What's that about?
Oh, well, feminism wasn't ever about marriage. Why be a wife?
Yeah,
We used to
because
have
it's a
why be a wife?
institution.
But what it really does, it tries to make lesbians normal, to fit into the het normality.
So it's about conformity.
And I always saw us as subversive and resisting. We were a resistance movement. The women's liberation movement was a resistance movement. And as soon as you sort of introduce marriage, people just go off in couples, lose their individuality, merge, and don't do political action. I've seen that happen to so many friends.
So many, yeah.
There's a handful of us who are still radical feminists and who still are fighting, but it's a fairly small number. What do you all agree with gay and lesbian
I agree.
marriage?
Get the government out of marriage, give it back to church. Don't. That was always my thought. I ended up voting yes, but I had to think about it for a long time because I'm not pro-marriage.
Yeah,
I'm not a lesbian,
not married.
So
I'm not a lesbian, but I'm not married, and I won't. I refuse to. I won't get married. So kind of in the spirit.
I'm actually engaged, but only. It sounds very unromantic. But I'll tell you why. It's a very unromantic reason, and one of the reasons is that if one of us, was to pop our clogs before the other, we would want the other one to be secure financially. So that was kind of our agreement. And also, I want a wicked party. That's about it.
Does the UK not have like a?
That is it, though, isn't it? It's just a party.
Pardon?
Does the UK not have de facto laws? Like in Australia, if you are in a de facto relationship living with somebody for 6 months, your like entitlements to their property and so on, if they die, is roughly similar to if you were married, as long as you can demonstrate that there is a historic relation.
Oh my God! Can you imagine if you lived with like the worst housemate in the whole world and then they died before
there
you?
There needs to be evidence of a relationship. There needs to be evidence of a relationship.
I think like a lot of it is like, it's a bit of a trick, isn't it? Like, I mean, I did unfortunately marry a man, unbelievably. And a lot of the reasoning behind that was because I got a daughter with him. And the idea was that if we got married, it would be more secure for her. There would be like, more financial security. It turns out to be a crock of shit, and it is just a massive trap. And like, luckily I'm divorced now, and we can celebrate that anytime with an even bigger party. But I think that like a lot of the traditional reasons that people get married outside of the romance and the big party, like they don't benefit women at all. So I'm absolutely on the same page as you, Elaine, with saying like, yeah, like the marriage institution itself is incredibly like patriarchal and is trying to put us into those like little like boxes. I hadn't thought as far as like, when people get married, they just kind of like they flee the scene, don't they? But that is what happens. So not into marriage for anybody. Sorry, Birdie.
Nice knowing
I'll still
you,
come to you
right. I ain't going nowhere.
Can I come to you, Adam?
I was going to say, Rebekah, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I mean, in the bio that you read out for me, which was great. I've never been introduced by anybody before. So part of that was, about me trying to engage with the wider LGBT community, which sounds a lot grander than my actual motives of just bothering people in sort of increasingly sarcastic ways to try and basically find out where everybody stands on lesbian inclusion. And I've been recently having a bit of a skirmish with Macclesfield Pride, who I'd approached about detransition after we put the Make More Noise on event back in 2019. I was just like feeling like, maybe we can actually like, build some bridges here, because detransition lesbians are going to become a large part of the demographic, whether Pride likes it or not. So I wrote to Mac Pride saying, do you have like, any interest in having somebody speak? Do you have like, any young girls who have like been doing the whole envy thing and maybe they want to do something else? Have you got any provision in place, or is it just a firm? And they basically just told me to fuck off and they would speak to the experts about it. And I was like, So these girls themselves, they're not the experts. It's like, you know, when a kid announces a gender identity, everybody's just like, fall in line. This kid knows what they're talking about. Like, everybody do what they say. But the moment they say they don't want to do it anymore, it's like, oh, no, we need some experts now, without thinking that maybe there aren't any experts.
So this is coming from the people that are always banging on about lived experience being the most important thing until the narrative doesn't fit. Interesting.
Exactly that. So I was speaking to them, they were basically just trying to stop talking to me. So they blocked me, obviously. And then I just kind of stopped speaking to them for a bit. But then more recently, I've just been like, you know what, like, lesbians need a space at the table here. And like, LGBA got the charitable status, and there was all that like absolute like hysterics everywhere about them, like, you know, being a terrible hate group and like total Nazis, and like everybody's got blood on their hands, blah, blah, blah. So I got back in touch with Mac Pride after they put a statement out saying what horrible people they were. And I was just like, look, they're not. And, you know, you won't talk to us. So, yeah, we've organised on our own terms. And now you're calling us like a hate group because of that. So this kind of went on back and forth for a while. And I had to get quite candid and just say, like, why is it that an organisation that is purporting to support lesbian, gay, bisexual people, like women who are being affected by this trans thing, if we've got anything to say about it that isn't like, you know, pure fawning, we're just simply not allowed in. And so I asked them if they wanted to meet up with me and Kira. Obviously, like, Kira's just like kryptonite to the entire LGBT community. And they stopped ignoring me then to say, no, you don't want to meet up. No, you're not welcome here. Like, no, you are excluded. And I was just like, it's a bit weird, that, isn't it? Like, you know, you're all about like inclusion at all costs, and yet you've kind of all got together to decide how best to exclude me and Kira. Like, you know, they sent me this email about, you know, sorry, go on.
It reminds this whole thing between like Stonewall and LGB Alliance and things like that. It reminds me of domestic abuse situations where the man typically doesn't want the woman anymore, but he doesn't want her to leave or have anyone else. So he would do everything within his power to poison her reputation and go after her. And this is exactly what Stonewall are doing to LGB Alliance and to lesbians in particular, and gay men who also stand up for women's rights as well, and for their own sex-based rights, obviously.
Well, yeah, because it's fundamentally incompatible, isn't it? Like having a gay group that, you know, is supposed to, you know, look out for same-sex attraction, but then is just like, well, nobody actually has a sexed body. That's all a fairy tale now. So the upshot of this basically is that despite ticking quite a lot of diversity boxes, me and Kira between us, we're not the right kind of diversity. So, you know, we've not been allowed in. So saw exactly the same thing happen with London Pride as well. Like, did you see the statement that they put out, just like completely distancing themselves from gay LGBA? And there was like a bit of a fracas going on in the comment section on their Facebook page, and then they just kind of went like fell swoop, delete all the gender critical turfy comments. And I was just like, this is mad. Like, who is Pride for now? Like, it's a trans wash now. So I knew what would happen when I got in touch with Mac Pride. I just wanted to pick the scab a bit and see for sure.
I feel like Pride is now the straight people being weird parade.
And corporate.
It has been for years.
Advertising and weird fetish stuff. Like, I couldn't be remotely motivated to go to a Pride. Like,
I don't want to go to Pride. The only time I've actually attended Pride in the last 5 years was get the L out to march in front of the Pride Parade in Manchester. That's the only like. Yeah, I was like a bit of a dickhead.
Representation, wouldn't you?
That was cool.
Representation.
We actually got a surprising amount of support. Quite a lot of like secret turfs lining the parade line. I mean, of course, there were some AGPs in like Wizard of Oz dresses telling us that we wanted to kill him, but we were just like, nah, we just want you to like just go somewhere else.
Fuck off. Yeah.
Rebekah, were they young women? Do you find that young women contact you, or are they too far gone?
Yeah, I've got quite a few mates, you know, sort of in their teens and 20s, basically just kind of like, you know, just gather girls everywhere I go, just like, tell me your story. And like, and because I'm obviously like, you know, well-known local feminist, if like, you know, if girls need like, you know, police help or like support with something shitty that's happened to them, like they'll come to me and they'll talk to me about it, and pretty much every single one of them's been touched by like the trans nonsense in some way, whether they've like, you know, pretended to be envy a bit to like fit in with their mates, or, you know, they're all like TRA, and I'm kind of like persona non grata until somebody needs a bit of support with something, and then it's just like, come on in, I'll make you a brew.
That's
like
of it, isn't it?
so they are aware of.
Yeah, but you seem to be there.
It's just
like,
it's the group thing, isn't it? It's like the peer thing.
They
There's
say the
plenty of
same
young
thing.
turfs
Sorry, I
out
didn't
there, like loads. I have
Yeah.
a
No,
couple of
turf is
and
getting popular now.
a
Like, we
Tumblr
are
page
pulling
with
it back.
quite a few thousand followers, and most of the people that follow, like most of the women that follow me, are young, and like they're out there. They're just not on the same platforms. They're not on Twitter. They're definitely not on Twitter.
TikTok.
Most of them aren't on Facebook, but they're out there. Like I was pretty surprised that I think I was at
finding them in real life though. Like, I mean, it's still like it's big in the schools. Like the schools are still like even like the little schools here, they're getting transwashed as well. So even though a resistance is building, I definitely agree, and it is like, you know, it's visible online. Like the reality's yet to catch up, because kids are scared of being like excommunicated by their peer group, and it's still very much like in group out group with them. And I think it's gonna be a long time before like the trendy in group are the turfs, but you know, we can keep working on it.
Do you think it might be like I went to like religious schools, but I was never religious, and I just sort of went along with it and never made a secret of not being religious?
That's what they're doing. They don't really believe it.
And is that what it must be like for them? You're just like, oh, well.
It is.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Of course they don't believe it. It's complete fucking nonsense. Yeah. You can see that. Like, teenagers might be fucking rash and reckless, but like ultimately they're not sick. They're just doing it because their mates are doing it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
That's very true.
Our local pride has really captured.
So that's it, basically. That's just me just having like a bit of a bitch about Mac Pride, because I think I'm just still annoyed that they're ignoring me.
Our local pride signed the letter up against the LGB Alliance, and they are in our schools. We've got a Pride Youth Society, and they teach that sex is fluid. So these kids have got no chance, and it's just that I know that schools are supposed to have the opposing view, but
that's not even allowed anymore. Like that needs that needs to be challenged every single time.
Yeah, it was, and they send the LGB kids to the Pride, to the youth societies where they're going to be indoctrinated, and I just you're so cool. You're all young and really cool, and you give me hope that, you know, when you say that we are getting young women coming to me, this is brilliant.
Who's the coolest, do you think?
Sorry?
Who's the coolest, do you think? Like you said, we're all young and cool, but like,
Elaine.
who's the coolest?
Birdie.
I reckon Elaine.
Yeah,
Rebekah as well. Rebekah's pretty cool.
She's on the shots.
I can be quite cool.
You know,
I'm having half a beer. Is that rock and roll enough?
Elaine feels, but I admire what you do, and to reach young women, because I'm on the local politics. I got called Queen of the Turfs yesterday by a young woman.
Ooh, good one though.
Yeah, by Liege.
Very good.
She's a 20-something. She's an Antifa, and it was talking about sports. And so I put up for Geiger Towers and the weightlifters, the Samoan weightlifters. And instead of, it was just call me names, I was saying stand up for the women, stand up for these Samoan women. They've been cheated by white patriarchy. Because she's a so-called feminist, and then she comes back, I'm not listening to you, you're Queen of the Turfs. And I just think, well,
yeah, because it breaks their brains, doesn't it? Like, they're presented with like visual evidence that just kind of like it fries their kind of burgeoning feminist circuits, because they've been told that, well, the ultimate thing you can do is honor somebody's gender identity. But when you look at Laurel Lovers on that fucking podium, you're not looking at gender identity there.
This is
like you're looking at straight up unfair cheating.
This is like when I was emo, and everybody said, you won't be emo when you're in your 20s, you'll grow up and you'll grow out of it. And I went, no, I fucking won't. I'll be emo forever. I grew out of it less than a year later.
Yeah.
I miss it. It was so harmless, wasn't it?
I was emo only for slightly longer than I was a goth. I was goth for a week.
Sorry, what did you grow out of?
Oh gosh, how do you start explaining that?
Emo is just like it was like trendy goth. It was like goth light.
It was
Not as cool as
better-
goth,
it
which
was
I've never quite
better
outgrown.
goth. No,
My
goth was
oldest
all
is
right.
goth.
Who was it? No, wait,
Better
I
than
will have a
Tran.
goth off with you. Like, emo was not as goth.
My
I'll have
oldest is
to show you some photos later. With all my
I would
long
be
black
interested
hair.
to see. I do actually like the emo style.
but the alternative scene is also
But yeah,
influenced
just yeah.
by ideology, big time. It seems the alternative kids are also the queer kids as well. So because my
Oh
oldest
yeah,
is-
it's definitely
Yeah.
got the weird kids.
really
Totally.
hit them. Yeah, the
I was a goth when I was a teenager. We were also like, you know, pretending to be into weird sex then. Like it just falls into it. But
I like that you said pretending, because that is exactly true.
oh, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But look, I guess it must have been 2017 when Karen and I started Actual Feminism, it was just making memes. And the purpose of it is that all of the like online radical feminist TERF groups and so on were quite, they were not fun. And they were not attractive. Like, you know, I grew up online. I have been shit posting and annoying people online since I was like about 9 years old. Like it's as natural to me as driving a car.
How are you banned? Tell me your ways.
and so we
Like
and
I'm always
about it.
banned from everything.
Okay. I mean, I can tell you my sock secrets if you like, but it's so when we started making these, because we wanted younger women to like get the ideas and have shareable ways and things that were funny, you know, like getting these concepts across and just starting that thought process. And you know, I'm not trying to blow smoke up my own ass, but what was quite interesting was that from there, the younger groups started and the funner groups started and the less serious kind of posting and started and people who were like not die-hard second wavers, you know, like borderline separatists.
What's the die-hard second waver?
You.
Yeah, but can you explain what you mean?
Like, you know, women who...
No, I'm interested in this. Can I come in now? Why do you keep muting me? Is there some background noise or something? Is that why you keep muting me?
Everybody gets muted at various points.
Yeah. Okay.
But when we're not speaking.
Do you think there's a real problem with age divide? Because it's sort of like you're saying you're laughing at me because I happen to be 74.
I'm not laughing at you. I was making a joke, but it's not.
They communicate in memes and tweets, like getting food's been like. I'm a really big fan of just like compendiums full of radical feminist theory, and I'm a really big fan of hanging out with as many women as I can. But like a lot of these young girls, they're literally just sitting in their room wanting like very, very, very fast information that can make them laugh. So that's, you know, if we're going to crack that, that's what we need to do.
Mm. Yes, but see, I think
and maybe then get them to the big compendiums.
There's sort of an age divide, but it isn't entire, because I mean, I've now been in loads of Radfem conferences and we run the lesbian history group. We're about to start again now. COVID's nearly over, and the age group there is literally 22 to 81.
That's amazing.
It really is. And if any of you ever, I think Rebekah's a Facebook friend of mine. You know, I post a lot of photos, and you've probably seen, if you scroll back down, the lesbian visibility picnic we did, and you know, you'll see like women of all ages, but I do think at times there's a real, I just feel despairing, because I didn't think at my age I would have to start fighting for women's existence again. And if you want me to come in now and say what,
yes please,
what sort of, because it follows on from what Rebekah was saying, really. I just feel despairing, because I think there is such women hatred and lesbian hatred in the world. And in fact, I was on a Zoom, just social, with two of my best friends in Melbourne this morning for about 3 hours, because God knows when we'll ever be allowed to travel to Australia again. And they were saying that they were talking to a friend of a friend was talking to a conservative, or liberal as they're called, a liberal politician, and he was saying that there's some new law about hate speech, something worse than now, going to happen in Melbourne. I don't know if you know about it, Jean, but and he thought, he actually said, this is a Conservative Party man, he said it's to shut up lesbian feminists. I mean, he sort of actually, and I think, you know, I think they're quite aware of our power, because we, you know, we have, and I think feminists in general have made a huge, you know, here we've made a huge.
Is this more blowback against Holly Lawford-Smith?
Pardon?
Is this more blowback about Holly Lawford-Smith?
No, it's not. It's something. It's something newer. So I haven't got the details because my friend was just saying today. She said the word invisible was in it. I'll have to find out more.
Please.
But it's sort of quite interesting because you see, I came out at a time when it was a great time to come out because it was at the height of the women's movement. And I remember we set up Tyneside Rape Crisis Centre, and we got interviewed by the press, and they said, "Are you a feminist group?" And half of us said yes, and half of them said no. And then within a few weeks, a whole lot of us had become lesbians. I mean, I'd already slept with women, but hadn't quite got there. And we just all came out instantly. And it was a terrific time. And we sort of thought we'd won. And then there's just been this slow backlash, which has sort of happened over years. And that now just seems that stuff you started off with, Cinzia, you know, about the Labour Party. And coming back to that, Jess Phillips, you know, she's an MP, Jean, here, prominent, supposedly for women's rights. And when the Lesbian Rights Alliance managed to get a meeting with Labour women politicians, Jess actually said to them, "You won't win, you know, you'll never win." And this was about, like, because we were standing up for women's rights and lesbian rights. And I just think we've got to a place where, I mean, you know, I'm so glad I'm going
That's
to
incredibly
London
disheartening.
That's just lesbians
Pardon?
at the queue, isn't it, really? And I just feel for you. My daughter dates girls.
Well, what's interesting,
daughter, you know, that's how Labour think of you, and my daughter is, you know, back of the queue.
But see, I just see the whole trans thing as the men's rights movement in another guise, because the philosopher Marilyn Fry way back actually said men can't bear lesbians because they cannot bear not having access to women. And I think that sums it up. And it's just like I've seen in the last 30 years.
They don't like being ignored either. We've got no use for them. We completely ignore them. And
it's just mad.
But then you've got Jess Phillips who stands up in Parliament to, you know, read out the names of murdered women, and yet she's not going to stick up for lesbians or even say what a woman is. Jess Phillips is never going to say what a woman is, and just a letdown, really. They're letdowns.
Is Jess Phillips a man?
No, woman. Jessica Phillips.
And
have to ask the question, don't we?
A woman who's not going to say what a woman is. Yeah, get out of here. Someone needs to tell her to get out.
She's always talking about her work.
Well, we've tried. You can email her, tweet her. She's got a pretty thick skin though. Like,
I'll send her a couple of like quality memes.
Yes, please, Jean. You're going up.
Excellent. Keep fighting the meme fight.
You make memes. You're down with the kids.
I find it more difficult when we're up against women. Elaine, can I ask you a question? When obviously you've been involved in the feminist circles for a very long time, and I was wondering if you have come up against women with this issue before. Like, have women always been anti-feminist?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, goddess, yeah. It's absolutely. But also the other thing is, I find what's interesting, we fall out among ourselves, you know, that I've had so many enemies and then of my lesbian friends, and then a few years pass and you see each other at a bop or a conference or something, and you can't remember why you ever fell out, and you rush up and hug each other. And I always found it intriguing that women say, oh, I'm not going to be a lesbian anymore because lesbians are so horrible to each other. And I mean, I think, well, of course we're horrible to each other because we're human beings. And that doesn't worry me. I just love being a lesbian, even if I go through periods of hating. Hate isn't the real, you know, I mean, disliking or falling out with friends.
I think they call it lesbian processing. So like the need to like deeply analyze what went wrong in an interaction and how it could be improved, which involves like, you know, examining your shortcomings in or, you know, one another's shortcomings and trying to pass it, which leads to conflict if you're not ready for that level of criticism. But yes, it can go either way.
I think it's a solid conflict resolution model.
Yeah, fine.
Do you think that's what it is?
I need to be told.
Do you think that's why women fall out so much?
Look, I think it's
honestly, I've never really fallen out with any women, so I actually don't know.
No, like I just don't, you know.
Maybe I've just been very lucky in that regard, or maybe I'm just dead nice.
Yeah, I just don't care if somebody disagrees with me. Like, even if, and I think that's what happens is that, you know, you're hanging out with feminists and you're like, oh, great. Like, you know, I'm with like minds and we're really, really passionate about all of this stuff. And then they say, you know, I like to get just a chicken sub with, like, I go to Subway and just get a chicken with tomato sauce. And you think that is the most boring fucking thing. There is all of those salads. I don't want to talk to you, and you have an argument over it because you disagree over this one little thing. And I think that the little disagreements are amplified by the passion for the things you agree with. And we just need to not do that. But to be honest, it's a much bigger issue. I think it's just amplified in radical feminism because of the passion, because of the women, and because we all think that just saying nothing is a female trait.
We all know each other, don't we? We do know each other quite well, as in, you know, each group's British. I know you're elsewhere, Jean, but generally we all know each other, so it's easier to fall out, you know, and to
totally.
Yeah, but coming back to what Birdie, because your original question wasn't about, I just diverged into talking about our relationships with each other, but you were more asking me about like people like Jess Phillips, and is it difficult? And I have found that, like, I was a union rep when I worked for ILEA, the Inner London Education Authority. We all lost our jobs when Margaret Thatcher abolished ILEA. And I got a youth work job in Buckinghamshire, where I went from extreme left wing to extreme right wing place to work. And my boss was a woman, and I was an out lesbian from the beginning, and she just tried to get rid of me all through the sort of when we be union negotiators. She was, and I know it was because I was a lesbian, you know, but I wasn't apologetic. I didn't sort of expect them to say, oh, that's all right, dear, we don't mind you being a lesbian. You know, I'd say, speaking as a lesbian, I disagree with this, and then they would just take issue, because I always find it interesting that women say, oh, well, we can't speak up because of the trans thing. And like, it was always hard speaking up as, like, I'm talking about the 1970s and 80s. It was always quite hard being an out lesbian. You were sort of vilified. I can remember I went to one job interview and they said, I'm not saying, the feedback was, I'm not saying you should have worn a flowery frock, but, you know, because I had on trousers and a jacket and you know, like, just that whole thing about what you wear, the way you walk, the way you present, if you're not feminine, you know.
There's not much to blame. Girls are still punished for not conforming. You know, if they step out of that gender box, they're still punished. So not much has changed.
Would you say, Elaine?
Yeah.
Would you say not much has changed, or would you say that it has changed and it's different? Would you say it's better or worse in some ways?
It's hard to tell. It feels bad, but I think in spite of everything, we have worked really well together to sort of fight the trans thing. Like, I think, and in spite of our sort of differences within, different groups within gender critical and radical feminists and all the rest, and all the sort of spats on Facebook, I still think we've worked together really well to bring the thing up to to public awareness. And I do think, Jean, it's happening in Australia. As I said, I take a great interest. I sometimes get up at 7 a.m. for the webinars in Australia. I just think women are starting entirely in Australia and America because of the state systems and the distances. But I do think the fight is going on there as well.
A great network here. Like I really, and I'm currently one of the co-organizers of a gathering we had to cancel. It was booked for April last year, so of course we had to cancel it. So now we're finally rebooking it for later this year, and I can't wait. I cannot wait to spend another 3 days like just around women. And it's some of the most I walk away from it both exhausted and almost high. Like it's such an amazing experience, but oh my God, interacting with radical women in that capacity is intense and exhausting as well. Like it's but I can't wait. And women will come from all over the country for it. And maybe a couple from New Zealand. I think we're hoping to have about 40.
Oh, good luck.
Like we're reasonably well connected in Australia despite our distance.
Elaine, who was the lesbian feminist writer you said died? Who was it that died? So I can get the book.
Alex Dobkin.
Was it Alex?
Oh, Alex Dobkin.
It was Alex Dobkin.
And she
Alex,
died
Alix Dobkin. Her famous song is "Any Woman Can Be a Lesbian," and that's what she's really well known for. But it's been going around. She was sort of very ill, and she was dying, and she died, I think, yesterday. She was 80, so.
Well, we'll put that
I mean, that's another thing that happens. A lot of the women who were our sort of icons have been dying, like Mary Daly and Andrea Dworkin and Marilyn French, and you sort of feel really, really sad because you're so used to growing up with their writings. But I'm still thinking about your question, Birdie, about whether it's better or worse. I just think I've written a chapter because Spin Effects are doing a book. It's coming out in July called Not Dead Yet. And it's contributions from 50 women all over 70. And I called my bit, it just came, the chapter heading just came, Activism Comes in Waves. And I think it does. Like, you had the suffragettes, and the more we know about them, the more incredible they seemed. And I think it's been interesting how there's been a lot of interest in the suffragettes and that film Suffragette. And then we had the women's movement in the 70s and 80s, and we sort of died out without even realizing. And I just think it's picked up again. And I think it is women of all ages. And that's what's really encouraging. So I suppose I feel hopeful. I've really enjoyed tonight, by the way. I think it's great. It's really hopeful.
I find you inspiring.
I think so too.
That's certainly my understanding. Like when in reading, women's activism history, there has always been women who have campaigned against women's rights, and generally those women have been centered and amplified by patriarchy because they're, because of, prior to standpoint theory being a thing, it was standpointing. It was like, no, these women know that being subordinate is better. Like, listen to them. And they were put up as the most appropriate counter because having men centrally active, like, you know, meeting women in a grassroots way to oppose women's rights would have been seen as you know, men lowering themselves to that, essentially. But yeah, in every major women's movement, the major opposition, they put women, because it's hard for us.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot to.
I must show you my T-shirt. Hang on.
Oh, okay then. I was going to say, I think there's a lot to learn from the suffragettes and the women's movement in the 70s and the 80s as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not
Very
a liberal.
inspiring.
I wear it at the moment. Hang on.
Oh, you wearing one too?
Love it.
Rebecca's got one. She's wearing hers tonight.
Am I the only one that doesn't have a posy shirt?
No, this isn't actually a cozy shirt, but it's that is.
Oh,
this
wow,
is
yours is different. Oh, I
Yeah.
want that
Ah,
one.
nice.
Wow.
Cold.
On
So
stage.
good.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should end this chat on the hopeful note. And I would like to say thank you very much to everyone who came to talk, and thank you very much to everybody who's listening. And if you can hit the like and subscribe button down below and catch us next week, that would be amazing. Thank you very much.